Hello, everyone. My name is Bridget, and I'm here with the wonderful Mark Wolynn. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Bridget, how are you again?
So good. Thank you so much for being here. I want to tell you a little bit about Mark, and then we'll get into the conversation. Mark is the director of the Family Constellation Institute in San Francisco. He's a world leader in inherited family trauma, a best-selling author, amongst many, many other things. And on this channel, I talk a lot about inherited trauma, ancestral healing, talk about a lot of these different things. So I'm excited because my audience does have a little bit of a base prerequisite to go by. So I'm excited to get into all that you do and the significance, particularly for now, of why it's extra helpful to look at why these things are coming up for each person individually and collectively.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So thank you, Mark. Thanks for being
you're,
here.
you're so welcome.
I'll back up to give context as to why I'm bringing you on, because on my YouTube channel, I don't do very many collaborations because it's just I'm streaming. But when things are really, really important to share with other people, I'm going, okay, let's share the info. So I heard about you through Josh Trin, and then earlier this year we got to do a session together, which was connecting to the break in the bond that I had with my mom, which was coming up in my relationship issues that had just ended. And then I got to do the training with you this year too. So it's been the Mark Wolynn year over here for me, which has been wonderful and absolutely life changing. So I want to get into, maybe we'll just start there with that mom child bonding break, because it ends up becoming so significant and it's everywhere. And I would love for you to share how it happens, and then also the results of when that bond breaks, how that manifests into our lives in different ways that we would never even think are necessarily connected to our mom.
Yeah, many of us have a break in the attachment with our mom, and we don't even realize it because the events that broke the connection are so early, or they're not talked about. For example, our mom, she gets pregnant and loses the baby before us, and then she's terrified that she's going to lose us too. And we're not aware of this conversation
Yes.
because we're a fetus, but in her thoughts are the words, I don't feel her kicking. I don't feel him kicking. What if he doesn't make it? What if I shouldn't have had that wine? What if I lifted that box? The baby died before. What if this baby dies too? Um, that's the only one event. It can be so many things. Our mom and dad are fighting. Someone's cheating. They're splitting up. Mom's not sure she's going to keep the baby. There's, and by the time tuning in happens, sometimes it can be too late. We don't have a cognitive memory of it, but we definitely have a somatic memory in our bodies, even to the messages that are given, like something's wrong, something's wrong. And then we come out with this sense that something's wrong with me
Yeah.
because we felt and heard and somatically experienced her cortisol, a barrage of cortisol when she was stressed out, which would literally um, uh, terrify us that we don't have this, again, this cognitive memory of this. And we would have difficulty trusting her love, difficulty trusting her nurturance and care, difficulty staying in our core, staying in our bodies.
Yes.
So the way a break in the bond can look is it can be a challenge for us to feel safe or secure in life. Because when mom's connection is cut off, we can have difficulty trusting the feeling of who we are inside, because the feeling of who we are comes again from mom's attunement. A child's inner experience of himself, herself, is dependent on mom's attunement.
Yes.
For example, mom gives us again the message, you're okay, by looking at us and saying, oh, there you are. Oh, you're smiling, you're happy. And we get this felt inner body sense of smiling, happy, me happy. Or, oh, you're hungry, you want to eat, me hungry. This again, all this comes from our mothers mirroring and bonding. Hence, when there's a break in the bond with our mother, it can be felt like a break in the bond with ourselves.
Mm.
Even the psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut talks about how the gleam in our mother's eye, um, this is the vehicle through which we develop a healthy narcissism, develop in a healthy way,
Yes.
have a sense of self. But when we're cut off from our mother's um, presence, because dad's cheating, they're fighting, we're in an incubator, she and dad took a holiday too early. We were sent to grandmom's at 2 for a couple weeks, and it was just too early. We're back and forth in the divorce, and it's too early to be away from her. When we're cut off from her presence, we're cut off from our core and deeper, our gut feelings, our gut knowing of ourself. I could go on and on. A
Yeah.
mom's, a mom and a baby are like two tuning forks. In fact, the baby's prefrontal cortex gets tuned by mom's feeling states. So when mom's depressed, that's another thing that can break the bond. Her depression, her stress, her disconnect. She didn't get enough from her mother. She and your father aren't doing well. When a mom's depressed or not in sync with her baby, the message again is, I can't feel mom. I can't feel her. Something's wrong. She's afraid. I'm afraid, because what she feels, we feel. And if her attention is diverted because of this stress, we go into panic. Where did she go? And then we start having this self-talk. I don't matter. I'm not I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough, or I'm too much. I better not be so much because mom is stressed. Ultimately, something must be wrong with me. And then as early as in utero, Bridget, we learn to organize around our mom's feelings, leaving our body, trying to make mom feel okay. Because if we can make her feel okay, then she can make us feel okay. It's strategic, actually. If
Yes.
I'm not too much, if I can, not rock the boat, if I can make mom feel okay, then I'll be okay. And now we're repeatedly leaving our core to attend to her because we no longer trust receiving from her. See, this is it. We're giving and not receiving. We no longer trust receiving from her. So basically, in our bodies, or what's left of them when we're not in them,
Yes.
um, we're alone, and
Yes.
we yearn for the security that's missing, the dopamine really that's missing from that relationship, the dopamine that's missing from the brain's reward motivation circuitry. And now here we are searching outside ourselves. We're giving to other people to make them feel okay, and then we're searching outside ourselves for what's missing: drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, cell phones, liking somebody to get a dopamine hit, being liked. We're just living on our cell phones or our tablets, and this is our life. Um, it's a joke in a way that our cell phones take the place of our mothers. it's the the it's not really a joke,
Yeah.
but it's kind of true. That energy that we don't want to face inside our bodies, that great loneliness that we all struggle with, Bridget, that great aloneness that
Yes.
we feel inside, we're reaching outside to fill through TV, liking somebody, social media, just living on our cell phones. So,
And we're seeing that, I mean, a lot this year, particularly, right? The increased isolation, depression, suicide, all of those
oh
things.
yeah,
So I'd love for you to talk about. We'll go deeper into the mom piece, but also swinging in the current feeling narrative that's happening, and this
yeah,
trauma that
yeah,
feels like it's coming up, or stuff coming up for people right now.
yeah.
Where is that coming from, and what has triggered it this year particularly? Is it
Oh,
repeating? What's
we
going on with this?
we have a little bit of a collective trauma going on right now
Definitely so.
that, that we're all experiencing, and we're all affected by it. And how can we not be? We're all connected, and the collective trauma of the pandemic. It's sort of shaken this container that we all share. You could even say it set fire to it. in a way. And in the heat, we're burning up our own unhealed, unresolved personal traumas are beginning to simmer, boiling over even. And that's where I tell people the pandemic is helpful for focusing us within. We can use this time and use this trauma um, to deal with our own personal traumas that are arising. And, they have an impact on our children and our grandchildren. We're inheriting the molecular changes
Yeah.
from events that our parents have gone through. The stress response is that, I like to say we inherit the stress response of our mother and father, our grandmother and grandfather. And our and now we have these unconscious reactions that we're not even sure why we have them. We're just freaking out because we've inherited the gene expressions of our parents and grandparents who suffered. So, I always talk about when people ask me about collective trauma, one of the ways we heal collective trauma is to heal our own personal traumas. We've got to do our own work,
Yes.
and this is pretty much a good opportunity to show us what's in shadow because it's coming out now.
Yes.
So if we can heal what's in shadow and integrate inside ourselves what's been fragmented, how we've numbed out, how we've shut down, how we've split off, how we tighten in our bodies not to feel something,
Yes.
then when we do this work from a place of more clarity, once we learn how to self-regulate and calm our limbic system, we can now, from a healing place, begin to take action in the world and do meaningful deeds in the world and create a meaningful impact in the world. And because when we're clear, we can focus on what we're meant to do in life, doing
Yeah.
what we enjoy, what energizes us, doing what's truly meaningful. Then we can be of service to people, um, be of service to others in the world. Um, so my work, you know it intimately because you've
Yeah.
taken my training,
Yes.
and my work is about inclusivity. Like
Yes.
no one can be rejected, no one could be excluded. And we've just we're going through a time in the world where there's a lot of division, polarities, opposition. And I like to say, before we can become truly inclusive of others, we've got, again, to do our inner work and include the ugly parts of ourselves inside of us, the parts we've excluded and don't want to feel. Because, our inhumanity toward others is a mirror for our own inhumanity toward ourselves. When we're split inside, we can do terrible things to ourselves, to other people. However, when we do this work, we begin to recognize this is young, fragmented, now included, tender, soft place that we're compassionate with inside ourselves, our heart, our inner child, our fragmented young parts. When we treat ourselves with respect, how can we treat others any differently?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And as we look at this and as our personal traumas come up and bubble up in the collective soup that's going on right now, I am a student of history and I like seeing those different patterns, those different traumas that have come up in my family or collectively that then are triggering the collective things right now. Can you talk about the beauty of these repeating traumas, how they actually are helpful for us? Because I think, especially when things get really intense, we start to move into victim mode or overwhelm, when in reality, it is an absolute gift that the morphogenetics are repeating themselves so that we can see it. And can you talk more about that and how that repeating energy works?
I love your question. See, it's a difficult question, and it shows that you really paid attention in my class. It's so great. Yeah, I look at these repetitions as helpful. They're not fun, right? Most, and then there's this question: what makes these traumas repeat? We all have trauma in our family history, but not everybody manifests this trauma. Um, why is this? Why do some people manifest and seem to relive these traumatic episodes and others don't? Epigenetics is only one piece of the puzzle. embryologists have known for, oh my God, over 100 years that when grandmom is 5 months pregnant with mom, all of the eggs that mom will ever have are already in her womb when she's 5 months a fetus, which
Yes.
means one of those eggs is us. One of those eggs will one day become us, and we're already present in our mother's womb and our grandmother's womb. And then when you take the work of Bruce Lipton and you add it to this work, who talks about how mothers' emotions can be chemically communicated to the fetus through the placenta and biochemically alter the genetic expression of the offspring. Um, Now you can begin to see why these traumas are embedded, and but what seems to anchor these traumas, why they're repeating, what creates these repetitions. What I found is when traumas aren't talked about,
Nice.
um, the healing is in, and this, and then I'm going to answer your question. This was my lead in, Bridget,
I love it. I love it.
to get to answer why they're good. So what seems to anchor these traumas? Why they keep repeating? What creates these repetitions? Traumas aren't talked about. The healing is incomplete because the pain is too great, the grief is too great, the shame is too great, the embarrassment's too great, the hurt is too great, and because we don't want to feel these things, or we want to push people away who've hurt us, that creates a fertile ground for repetition. When people are excluded or rejected, basically there's not been any resolution, then aspects of these traumas show up in later generations. And unconsciously, we will repeat the pattern of our parents and grandparents, or repeat the pattern in our own lives,
Yes.
or share a similar happiness, unhappiness with our parents and our grandparents, or keep repeating our own unhappiness until the trauma finally has a chance to heal. I'm not the one who invented this. Freud, 100 years ago, talked about this. When he talked about repetition compulsion, um, basically the trauma keeps repeating for a chance at a better outcome. In other words, the contraction of the trauma is basically seeking its expansion.
Yes.
So, the trauma is merely seeking an opportunity for a better outcome so it can heal. And I believe that the contraction of this trauma is ultimately looking for its expansion. So it will repeat until that expansion happens. So every time there's a trauma, there's another chance for this expansion to happen. So we keep repeating the contractions for until there's an opportunity for us to get quiet inside. And again, I'm going to take us back to what I said earlier and do our inner work
Yes.
so we can move toward expansion. Because really, what are the great healing movements in life but surrender and expansion?
Yes. Yes, totally. And one of the baffling things to me about the repetition is the obvious nature of it. I going into the depth of your work and realizing, okay, it repeats at a similar age. The same age that you have a trauma come up was the same age that your grandpa had a trauma come up. And the same exact thing that happened. Like I was talking to one of my dear friends, her grandmother and her mom were all raped at the exact same age.
Yeah.
And the same results happened. And so the obvious pointing out, trying to resolve itself. Do you want to tell a few examples or how that works?
Yeah. Thank you. I love your questions. I really do, Bridget. They're good questions. It's a great lead in. Yeah, people ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm carrying inherited family trauma?
Yes.
And there are signs. Now, look, we can be born with an anxiety or a depression. It's true, and never think to separate it from
Yes.
the events of the previous generation. But we can also, like you said, experience these repetitions or experience a fear that suddenly shows up or a symptom that begins to express as soon as there's many of them. Ages are one. One is when we reach a certain age and all of a sudden this fear, the symptom strikes unexpectedly or suddenly, maybe age 30, grandma becomes a widow and she never dates again. She lives in black. She's mourning her whole life for grandpa. And without thinking about it, mom and dad around the same age start to pull away or divorce or separate. And without thinking about it, we look at our partner at 30 and we go, yeah, they don't just, he or she doesn't do it for me anymore.
Yeah.
Without thinking that we're connected to this ancestral alarm clock that goes ringing at age 30. It's not just ages. There's milestones that we hit in our life or events that we hit in our life. For example, as soon as we get married. So everything's great, we're happy, things are going on fine. And all of a sudden we get married and we feel trapped or depressed without connecting it to the events of the previous generations. I one time worked with this Iraqi woman, and it's in my book. I talk about this woman. She loves this guy, her fiance, and she can't wait to get married. But as soon as she marries him, she feels trapped and she doesn't understand it. And when we looked at her family history, we found out that both grandmothers were given away in Iraq at age 9 and age 12 to these much older men, 30 years older, 40 years older. And these young grandmothers, these children,
Yes.
are trapped in these loveless marriages
Yes.
to these older guys. So what's so funny is I worked with this woman's sister. I swear to God, her sister married a woman 40 years older, like one of the grandmothers. She felt trapped like the grandmothers. And the third sister would never get married at all. So the same trauma
Yes.
was affecting all three sisters. So marriage is one, another trigger is moving. So all of a sudden, we move across town. We move to a new city. And you would think, oh, we're happy, we're moving to this new opportunity, yet we sink into a depression, or we even become suicidal, never connecting it to the depression of our ancestors that were raped, beaten, persecuted, forced out of their homeland, killed. And we're not even connecting it. But the moving is the trigger. Another trigger is getting rejected by our partner, even if we've only dated this partner for 2 months. And all of a sudden we go, oh, I don't want to live anymore. This person was great. Oh, I'm so depressed. I'll never love anybody again. We're not talking about that partner.
Yes.
We're talking about our mother, but we don't realize it. But we get rejected by a partner and the grief is insurmountable. And it takes us back to a much earlier grief, a break in the attachment with our mother, or a break in the attachment with our mother and her mother, or a break in the attachment with our father and his mother. There's others, we get pregnant. I one time worked with this woman. She was consumed with anxiety. And I said, whoa, let's slow it down. And she said, I'm just so, I said, when did it start? She said, 6 months ago. What happened 6 months ago? That's when I got pregnant. I said, oh, you're pregnant. And she said, yeah. I said, what's the worst thing that will happen if you're pregnant and have a child? One of those questions I
Yes.
asked. And she said, I'll harm my child. And I said, have you ever harmed a child? And she said, no. And I said, did anyone in your family ever harm a child? And she said, oh. And all of a sudden, she remembers a story from her childhood that the grandmother was a new mother, a new wife, and had a little baby sleeping upstairs. She lights a candle, catches the curtains, catches the house, can't get her baby out. Baby dies in the fire.
Mm.
And she says, the woman says to me, but we were never allowed to talk about it. You walked on eggshells around grandma. You never brought that baby up. And remember what I said earlier about traumas repeating, right? When something isn't talked about, when someone's excluded, this baby, the grandmother's grief, that creates a fertile ground for repetition.
Mm.
So now I'm able to work with this woman, and she realizes she's carrying the terror
Yes.
of her grandmother in her fears. Well, that's us.
Yes.
Here you and I are, Bridget, and everybody, all the listeners, walking around with fears and feelings
Mm-hmm.
that don't always belong to us.
Yes.
because of traumas that have biologically, chemically, molecularly changed us,
Yes. It's
changed our DNA.
crazy. It's super wild. And that's happening obviously all the time, us walking around. And as you said, moving towards doing our own personal work is going to be critical to identify these things so that we don't have to carry any of the pieces of them. Now, right now is this time where is those moments that we'll look back with, say, working with people 20 years from now and go, oh, you were a part of that COVID thing happening. You were a part of that experience. What are ways that people right now, I sometimes feel myself even contracting or not feeling as open and connected. And I'm a very open person and in a very open place that isn't very locked down right now. But how can people stay connected, open, warm during this time of social distancing, of masks, where it's do not even look at another person? How can people remain receptive and agile in this place rather than getting traumatized during this time, which will then just continue to play itself out?
So it kind of goes with the big attitude of can we see what happens to us and what happens in our world as doors instead of walls?
Mm,
Really, can we look at this pandemic in a way? What is it asking me to do? What's it forcing me to do? It's forcing me to be out of connection with people.
yes.
So maybe we've used connection with people to handle the fears and pain and terror we have of confronting connectedness with ourselves.
Mm.
So, again, I sound like a broken record, Bridget. I'm sorry.
You
But
don't at all. We need to continue to repeat it until it gets addressed and talked about.
so, can we use these, our aloneness and our terror of our body, our terror of going into the intolerable loneliness? Can we use it as an opportunity? What is this pandemic forcing me to do? I'm alone. I'm out of connection with people. I feel my anxiety bubbling up. I feel the depressions that I thought were under control starting to resurface. These are all doors, not walls.
Mm.
To look, I think this goes back to science. Let me go back.
Okay.
So when a trauma happens to us, it changes us. Literally, it causes a chemical change in our DNA, and this changes the way our genes function, sometimes for generations. Technically, there's a chemical tag attaches to our DNA and says, "Okay, this terrible thing just happened, and because of this terrible thing that just happened, we're going to change our DNA, not the DNA sequence, but the way it expresses to deal with this terrible thing that happened."
Yes.
And then the way the changes happen change us, how we act or feel. And we can become sensitive or reaction to situations that are similar to a trauma, even if that trauma occurred in a previous generation. So we have a better chance of dealing with it in this generation. Um, I'll tell you why I'm talking about the science in a minute, because I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way. But I want the listener to understand what's going on. Why do we have these repetitions? Well, we're carrying biological residues.
Yes.
So if our grandparents come from a war-torn country, let's say, bombs going off, bullets flying, people being lined up in the square, people being taken away, people being shot, they're going to develop an epigenetic adaptation, which could be sharper reflexes, quicker reaction times, reactions to the violence to help them deal with this trauma, which now they're going to pass forward the skill set, and we're going to get it, of sharper reflexes, quicker reaction times. The problem is also that we're inheriting a stress response.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I was leading up to, a stress response with the dials set to 10. And here we are prepared for this wartime catastrophe that never arrives. Well, the pandemic has brought us back to wartime,
Yes.
meaning here we are dealing with our fears, our terror, our aloneness. And I've only given you the bad news that, we're all in the same boat and this boat's sinking. But I promise it's good news, because actually what we're finding is researchers are able to reverse trauma symptoms in mice. And the implications are pretty vast. Why mice? Because mice and humans share a similar genetic makeup. 92, 93% of the genes in humans are similar to the genes in mice, with over 80% being identical. And plus, you could get a generation of mice in 12 to 20 years. Mice in 12 to 20 weeks. Where humans, we have to wait 12 to 20 years to get a generation. So the problem is we can study mice and see what happens. So when traumatized mice are exposed to positive experiences, and this is going to be my answer to what we can do right now, positive experiences. When traumatized mice are exposed to positive experiences, it changes the way the DNA expresses. And this is key. Technically, the positive experiences inhibit the enzymes that cause DNA methylation and histone modifications, which are two of the mechanisms for transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. So, and the mice aren't the only ones who benefit from positive experiences. It's how we as humans heal.
Yes.
And I can't say enough about this, but it's how we heal from inherited family trauma. We've got to calm our brain's stress response, whether we've inherited it or that stress response is a result of a trauma that happened to us earlier.
Yes.
So to heal, and this is what we do, this is the answer to your question, how can we use the pandemic to heal? We've got to have positive experiences that can change our brain. Then we need to practice these new feelings that arise, these new sensations that arise from these positive experiences, from this, the sensations associated with these positive experiences. And when we do this, we create new neural pathways in our brain. That's not the only thing that happens. When we have positive experiences, it also stimulates the release of feel-good neurotransmitters in our brain, like dopamine, like serotonin, GABA. It also stimulates the release of feel-good hormones that we need in our body, like oxytocin, estrogen. It even changes the genes, the very genes involved, not that changes the genes themselves, but change the way the genes express. The very genes involved in our body's stress response begin to function in a different way. In other words, we can change the way our DNA expresses. And this is key. And this is what we need to be doing. What are positive experiences?
What are some examples of those?
Yeah. I read your mind. Positive experiences can be, I teach this all over in the book, how to receive comfort and support even when there wasn't any. So, for example, if we didn't have the support of our mom or our dad, we still can have it through these practices, or practicing feelings of compassion for ourselves, compassion for what happened to our parents when they were small, or our grandparents during the war or the trauma. We can have practices of gratitude, practices of doing something for people, a generosity practice, practices of loving kindness, doing something kind every day for someone, practicing mindfulness, practicing really, ultimately, anything that allows us to feel strength or peace or joy inside ourselves, and bring wonder to it, bring awe to it, bring curiosity to it, because these types of experiences feed the prefrontal cortex and help us reframe the stress response. So it is a chance to calm down. So it is a chance to downregulate. The idea is to pull traction away from the limbic system, the amygdala. Now, the overactive amygdala that in many of us is twice its normal size, because it's always thumping and saying, guard yourself, get out of your body, stay safe, shut down, tighten up, go numb, pull away, dissociate, thinking it's helping us, but it's not helping us. It's just regenerating, re-engineering these traumas to repeat. So the idea is to pull energy away from the limbic system and to bring engagement to the forebrain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, where we can integrate these new experiences, these positive experiences, and our brain can change. We know, Bridget, from mindfulness studies that practicing mindfulness actually shrinks the amygdala, shrinks it, and it thickens the prefrontal cortex. Basically, what would I tell somebody in the pandemic? I'd say, to put it in a nutshell, practice being with the uncomfortable sensations in your body until you can reach beneath them to the sensations that we experience as life-giving in our body. Sensations like pulsing, heart beating, tingling, buzzing, softening, spreading, expanding, blood flowing, waves of energy, waves of warmth. And then we need to be able to hold these sensations that are positive in our body for at least a minute, at least 6 times a day. So we're talking about 1 minute. I'm talking to you listeners who are in the pandemic right now. Spend a minute 6 times a day becoming the pulsing, heart beating, feelings of spreading, expanding, warmth, heat in your body. Because doing this can be enough to change the brain and calm that stress response. Again, it's essential we take time to have these positive experiences and then let the sensations of these positive experiences affect us viscerally, physically. Trust the feeling of it in our body.
Yes, it's such a good feeling. Thank you for introducing me to that and
Yeah.
everyone else in this moment. And I feel into this time too, and we are in one sense very lucky that we do get to be at home and do this. Whereas in other times, there was someone breaking down our door to kill us or to do something
Yeah.
really, so it has that wartime response, but we don't actually have those things coming at us, and we can use that trigger that comes up and process it, and we have all the tools now that say our other ancestors didn't have. So we're in this very, very resourced position, which I really like. And I wanted to speak to, because a lot of my audience identifies with the term empathic, and I want to bring a scientific reasoning into that, to support how they can go within and where that's really coming from.
Okay, so empathic. Do you mean the ability to be an empath? Do you mean
Highly
the
sensitive,
highly sensitive?
highly sensitive, empathic, porous, really sensitive to collective energies, what's going on. Those
In
things.
a way where we are taking on other people's energies?
Yes.
Oh, I get what you're saying here.
Okay.
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 Okay. So many times when there's been a break in the attachment with our mom and we stop trusting her care, like I said, we kind of leave our body to organize around her feelings, her feeling states, so we can protect ourselves. We become very empathic. We become psychic in a way. We begin to learn to read the field of other people, and so we can feel safe. And in a sense, it's not an embodied thing we're doing. We're leaving the body almost to go over there, out there, to make sure that we're safe. And then we complain that I'm really psychic, but I take on people's energy. Or I'm really good at knowing what people feel, but I have trouble staying in my own body. So
Yes.
sometimes these breaks in the attachment create a form of empathy, a form of psychic ability that's coming from without, meaning that we're leaving our bodies to attend to the other, to feel what the other's feeling, so we're protected. But we're not really protected because we've left our body. We've left the fort, so to speak, and
Yes.
there's no one manning the fort.
Yes.
So, in a sense, we can have a deeper type of empathy, a deeper type of psychic ability when we stay embodied. In
Mm.
other words, What? So is this what you're looking for?
This is
Okay, good,
spot
good.
on.
Okay, because when we stay embodied with the practice of feel warmth, spreading, expanding, centered, grounded, feet on the ground, knees open, backs of the knees open, pelvic floor open, toes spreading, mouth open, body, core coming into awareness. When we can do these types of things and stay in our bodies, there's a much deeper psychic potential
Mm,
or empathic potential from being nothing but energy, our own energy, staying inside our own bodies and being with our own core allows us, I think, a greater psychic ability. Certainly, it connects us with our gut feelings, and certainly it connects us with that universal oneness. Not to get too airy fairy, but when we're in our own bodies, open and connected, we are connected and open to the energy of everything
mm,
because it's right there in our bodies.
mm. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. We don't have to leave our bodies to go out to get it. It is right in us. I love this line from Eckhart Tolle. He talks about how the great thinkers, it's not that they know how to think, it's that they know how not to think.
Mm,
And so using my words, it's not like we have to go out and think with the mind. It's that we have to empty the mind, not think, and just be embodied. And then we find that these awarenesses, they come into us, they come through us. We don't have to go toward them. They're here waiting to enter us when
yes.
we're embodied. So, in a sense, staying in, feeling what we feel, positive sense, going back to doing our own inner work, broken record, doing our inner work, staying embodied with the positive sensations that arise from positive experiences. And then staying in our bodies, we can feel our gut knowing and what our gut feeling is. And we can speak from this gut knowing and this gut feeling because we're connected to it.
Yes.
And that gut knowing, that gut feeling is also connected to something much, much greater.
Beautiful. You just put me in that state and everyone listening, I'm sure. So thank you for bringing that perspective of clarity to that identity and what we can do with that. That's very, very helpful to be in the communication narrative. I want to start wrapping up and talk about going back to the mom baby bond, uh, particularly around the idea of the emotional physical mirroring that happens and the significance of that. The reason that I got the inspiration to interview you was I was on Instagram and then I saw this mom with a mask goo-gooing her baby, doing all this with her baby, and I went, oh no. I know that a lot of moms aren't wearing, say, masks at home all the time, but there's a lot more of that being had, as well as little kids going to school. My nephew, who's 8 years old, mask every day. With kids, they have to be far apart.
And they're not getting the social engagement that
Yes.
we get through expressions and, mouths are so important. And yeah, I get
Let's
it.
talk about, I think even just speaking to the significance of it will help bring more awareness and consciousness to get it in,
Okay,
and to,
let's go back all
right?
the way to moms and babies.
Yes.
So our moms and us as babies. So the way we learn to have a core, I've been talking a lot about the gut feelings and being in our core. Well, the way we learn to have a core in the first place is when our mom is able to look in our eyes, as I was talking about earlier, and say, "Ah, I see you. Oh, you're sad. Come sit next to me." And mom is able to mirror to us what we feel, because before mirroring, there's just this. And for mom to begin to help us have a separate sense of self, she's mirroring to us what we feel. We don't know what we feel until our mom mirrors it to us and expresses to us, you're happy. Oh, you're smiling. Oh, your eyes are sparkling. You like that. And we get this inner sense when mom does that. We light up because she almost, in a sense, feeds to us what it is we feel. So we know what we feel and have a first-hand experience. And so in the terrible twos, there's this experience of me do it, me happy, me sad, me good, me play. Almost a sense of enough of it's come in where we're able to have this first-hand felt experience of our own body through our mother mirroring this to us. But many of our mothers were depressed. Many of our mothers worked too early. Many of our mothers and fathers were fighting. Now some of our mothers are wearing masks. We maybe didn't get, we listeners, enough of this to have a gut that we can trust, to have an inner body that we feel safe in. So we might have to do mirror ourselves. We might literally have to say, okay, rapid heartbeat. I know when you were little, we were anxious all the time, but just because it's a rapid heartbeat doesn't mean that it's terror. It could be radiance, love, excitement, exuberance. But to us, we don't know that. Anything with a rapid heartbeat means anxiety. So we might have to place our hand on our anxious heart, which if we get rid of the label, anxious, what really is happening? Heart beating fast. If we get rid of the label of I'm in terror, I'm anxious, really? Maybe just heart beating fast. And we put our hand on the heart and bring our breath to the heart and bring our awareness to the heart, sensation, breath, awareness, the other Holy Trinity. We bring, and it's Holy Trinity season, but the other Holy Trinity, sensation, breath, awareness. And we bring our awareness and we say, hey, heart, I've got you. You're just a young part of me that was scared when mom couldn't see us. I've got you, and I'll breathe with you until you feel safe. I'll breathe with you, heart, until you feel held and seen and safe. I'll breathe with you, heart, until you and I are one, until we integrate as one, until we can feel warmth, expansion, flow. Basically, what we're doing is we're mirroring ourselves because our mom could not. She was too stressed out. Does that make sense?
Yes. And
Yeah.
what could a mom say to her little baby right now, or even a little kid that's
Same
really
words.
young? How
Same
can
words.
that?
I've
Yeah.
got you. I'm here. I see you.
Yeah.
I'll breathe with you
Yeah.
until you feel safe. I'll breathe with you. I'll just sit here with you. I'll keep looking at you and talking with you and breathing with you until you feel safe in there. Because if they mums don't catch this, the next defense might be an independent baby. In other words, the baby shuts down, stops trusting the mom, and starts playing with his or her toys. And mom then says, oh, look at my little independent child. Not true. The independence is a cry for help. It's a cry of, mom, see me, mirror me, talk to me, calm me, look at me. Because the mistake that can happen, which often happened, is our mom said, oh, there's my little Mark, or there's my little Bridget, my independent one.
Yes.
And they missed that we weren't independent. We were just defending against not being seen. Yeah. So moms, it's an important time, of course, because there's a lot of terror and division and splits and aloneness and body sensations that are rising. It's an important time to mirror
Yes.
and our children. And it's an important time to say, I've got you. I'm here. I'll breathe with you. The same sentences that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
I've got you, heart. I've got you, belly. I've got you, solar plexus. And I'll breathe with you until we integrate as one. And then to be able to hold this feeling of integration, to be able to sustain this feeling of integration for at least a minute, 6 times a day, is exactly what I'm talking about here.
Mm, that's so helpful. I know that that will be helpful to so many that can just go right now that are wondering, what can I do? Well, I don't know, to give some framework of this is significant and you can do this.
Yeah, we can
So,
do this.
yes. So thank you for that. And one
You're so
last
welcome.
question around this and the mom, particularly, as Zach Bush talks about how the mitochondrial DNA defines our adaptive capacity.
And it comes
And
from the mother. We know this.
which comes from the mother, which comes
Right.
from the female line. So how can we relate and adapt with this in connection to our mom? Like,
Yeah.
is our
So
connection to our mom significantly tied to this adaptive capacity as well?
yeah, it is actually. The mitochondrial DNA, which comes from our mother, comes from the female line, means that we are also inheriting her stress responses and our father's, but through the sperm. But we're inheriting our mitochondrial DNA from our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers and all the traumas. So again, it's a good time to look at the traumagram, the genogram, the family history, and figure out what happened, and to not hate our moms, but to look at what made our moms disconnect,
Yeah.
what made our moms shut down, what made our moms unable to have relationship, what made our moms angry, frustrated. And it's a good idea, rather than hate them and blame them, to develop a skill of understanding and compassion, because we're inheriting this mitochondrial DNA from their experiences, which, through this talk today, Bridget, we've been talking about how to heal it, how to work with it, whether it's from our father, so my book has all the information, of course. It didn't start with you, but I also list studies on my Facebook page. And, there's a recent study out of uh, uh, JAMA Psychiatry, Journal of American Medicine Psychiatry, that looked at mothers and their daughters, and mothers that suffered depression or trauma early in their lives were their daughters were more likely to struggle with depression or bipolar disorder. And
Mhm.
then on Facebook, I also talk about this recent Tufts University study where men were able to pass their anxiety to their children through their sperm.
Mhm.
And this is the first study that showed that human sperm and mice sperm mirrored the same changes, the same non-coding RNA changes, as in mice and humans. So, what can we do? Just what we've been talking about here. So, if I have to leave the listener with
Yeah.
um, what to do, um, look in your family history. Don't hate your parents for what they did. Understand what happened to them that affected parenting, that affected mothering. Understand that we've likely inherited similar DNA expression, either from mom's mitochondrial DNA, as Zach Bush talks about, or from our father's sperm, that we've inherited these epigenetic changes that affect the DNA. And then, rather than to hate our parents, develop compassion for them and for ourselves for what we've inherited. Then open the door and do the work. If my mom lost the baby before me, that affected her and me. If my mom lost her brother when she was little, that affected her and it affected me. If my dad lost his dad when he was 2, that affected his mom and him, what he could get from his mom. Understanding what we've inherited opens the door for us to do our work, and then to work on our mirroring mirroring our little child inside us, mirroring those places inside us that are tight, anxious, shut down, numb, with words, I'll hold you with our hands so you don't have to hold our body with tightness and numbness. You're talking really to your limbic system. You're talking to your amygdala, which is like a 2-year-old that's tightening and activated and overactive from with the concept it's keeping us safe. The
Yeah.
notion it is this notion by screaming to our body, tighten. It's sending out alarm signals to the alarm towers of our body. Tighten, numb, leave the body, shut down. Really, when we hold those anxious places in ourselves and talk to them and bring our breath to the sensation with awareness and calm the stress response, the amygdala says, oh, you're in there. I don't have to send out these alarm signals. Oh, you've got this. When we do this 6 times a day, a minute each time, the amygdala basically can calm, can quiet. We can down-regulate our stress response.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mark.
Oh, my pleasure, Bridget. It was my pleasure to talk to you. I loved your questions. Great questions.
Thank you. And so we talked about your book, which everyone needs to go read. It's also on Audible too. It didn't start with you, right?
It didn't start with you, how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. It's all in there, everything I'm talking about. It was the winner of the 2016 Nautilus Award for Psychology and
Rightfully
um,
so.
translated into 19 languages. So
Nice.
you can read it in your own language if some of the viewers are
Beautiful.
in all the major languages. Yeah.
Yes. And where else can people find you? Your Facebook group that you said, or your Facebook
The
page?
Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, everything, or my website, Mark Wolynn, WOLYNN.com. Yeah, we shortly, we just did a training, which you were part of, which we're going to make available to people to purchase so that we're just tuning it up and getting it ready.
Awesome. Yeah, and all those links will be down below, so you can be sure
Oh,
to
they were.
get those.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Or in the show notes if this is podcasted, which will probably be too. So thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being
Thank you so much for
here.
having me.
Thanks for
Bridget.
all your work. It's incredible. And thank you all to all the listeners who are here today and stayed with us and are doing the work. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.